on this session this afternoon. My name is Sheena Wyatt. I'm indeed a Caped Crusader for your personal brand. I know that because it says so on my badge. You are not here to listen to me this afternoon. I am chairing this session, so as we go through the session, you might well be having me putting this under your face so that if you have a question, we can all hear what it is. So take a seat, make yourself comfortable. You're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to these two lovely ladies. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Claire and Rachel. Over you go.
Thank you so much, Sheena. So good afternoon. Round of applause for Sheena. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much indeed for signing up for this session on learning across borders. My name is Rachel Begbie. I work as the Group Director of Learning and Development and Wellbeing for Corinthia Hotels Limited. Just to give you a little bit of background about what Corinthia is. Corinthia is a Maltese company. We currently have 16 operational hotels around the world, stretching the furthest north, St. Petersburg in Moscow, and the furthest south, Khartoum in Sudan. The company also operates a catering and events division in Malta, and we currently have about 2,500 full-time people, plus part-time, plus seasonal workers as well. And we also have hotels about to open. We've got a hotel due to open in Dubai, Bucharest, Brussels, Moscow, and Rome. Prior to working with Corinthia, I worked for Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts for 18 years in both learning and development and HR at a regional level, and had the pleasure of working in the UK, Lebanon, Ireland, Egypt, Germany, the Czech Republic, Portugal, Hungary, Russia, on either a permanent or a support basis. So I've really been blessed to work in this field of hospitality for the last 30 years, and 20 of those years has been specialising in HR and L&D. So I consider myself fairly able to talk to you about learning across borders today. So without further ado, over to my worthy colleague, Claire.
Thank you, Rachel. That's quite a globetrotter. I can't say the same. My name is Claire Doody. I lead international learning and development at Twitter. I'm based in our Dublin office in Ireland, and my remit is looking after learning and development for our EMEA and Asia Pacific regions. I also lead a global program called How We Work, which is about defining the best practices and driving the behaviours for working effectively and collaborating in a global distributed organisation. A little bit about Twitter. Many people are surprised to learn that it is quite a small operation relative to its brand and its impact in the world. We have 5,000 people altogether. Just under half of them are based in San Francisco. The other half are distributed across 30 offices all over the world, North America, LATAM, EMEA, and APAC. L&D at Twitter looks after onboarding, career development, manager and leadership development, and then driving key behaviours on our strategic initiatives, like How We Work, like Healthy Workplace, so inclusion and diversity, healthy conversations, and topics like that. We are really working hard on our decentralisation efforts, and part of that is figuring out how we can best service those people in all of those locations. So, looking forward to hearing from all of you today as well. It's going to be an interactive session, and the first thing we're going to do is ask you to pull out your phone or your laptop and tell us what words come to mind when you think about learning across borders. And if you go to menti.com, and the code is on the screen, I'll leave it there for a moment, and then I'll flip over so we can see a word cloud emerge.
We know it works. We did test it. Yeah. You can't be at a technology conference and the technology not work, can you really? Oh, well done, great. Localization.
So the code is 927018.
We're going to...
927018. It's at the top of the screen as well. Okay, some interesting themes coming out there. Language and localization is a big one. Translation is there. Time zones, that's a huge issue. Culture. Diversity. Yeah. Well, I think we're going to cover off most of those topics today.
I think we are, and it looks like we've really got a participative group, Claire, so that's good, yeah.
Yeah,
because there'll be more later. You will not be sitting still today. So,
yeah, I wish it would stop moving. I can't read it.
That's it. We're just going to look at the word cloud for the rest of the hour that we're together.
It's kind of hypnotic.
Yeah.
Well, culture, language, localization, diversity are certainly the ones coming through there in loud and clear. Okay, let's shift back into, and we can revisit this as we go. Shift back into the presentation. And the first topic that we're going to talk about is consistency, and Rachel is going to kick that off.
Yeah, we thought this was a really interesting one, and just so you know, Claire and I did not know each other before we were put together for Learning Technologies, and we've had a few Skype calls, and it was really interesting for us, kind of two very, very different organisations, but amazing the similarities between us, but also the differences as well, and hopefully you'll see that as we go through the presentation today. So Corinthia and Four Seasons are both luxury hospitality companies. And when we think about luxury hospitality, it is really all about consistency, from the way that the guest is checked in at reception, from the way that the bed is made, from the way a cup of coffee is served. So being part of an international brand means that consistency has to be wherever you operate, regardless of region, language, culture, religion. You just have to have consistency across you do. So how's that achieved? Well, from my experience, both at Four Seasons and at Corinthia, training is key to this. And it starts at the very, very beginning in the way that we orientate people into the organisation. So the company orientation program is really, really key to this. It must be a standardised program which is localised and spoken in the local language. And the people that are delivering that for you have to be trained, so therefore you have a consistent message going wherever you're located in the world. So the core needs to remain the same. Also, when we think about hotels, obviously we are operational, we're giving service to our guests. So we have to think about the on-the-job training as well. And so for us, that means having a set of standard operating procedures, or SOPs as we call them in the business, which again follow company standards. And they're obviously localized or refined based on destination. And again, it needs a team of dedicated people that are trained on how to deliver these SOPs to their colleagues wherever you work. Supervisors across organizations, again, attend a supervisory development program, teaching them the same core principles of management. And consistency is achieved here by the fact that when I launched the program 2 years ago, I virtually launched it to all our HR directors and all our L&D managers across the group. So therefore, there was the same level of understanding amongst all the presenters that we would have. And for managerial training, we've literally just, with Corinthia, we've just signed a partnership with a third party, providing an alliance of training programs, both classroom but also virtual. So for 2020, we've picked 5 programs, which at the end of 2020, all managers in the company will have gone through those programs. And again, to provide consistency, I took our team of HR directors and L&D managers through each program step by step, so we're all delivering it from a consistent platform. But consistency really goes beyond training. It's also how people are treated as employees. So the way that they're hired, so we all interview in the same way. The way that they're promoted in the future. And also that at all times, equal opportunities is provided for them. So yeah, really key, you know, and certainly in luxury hospitality, this is our central word to everything we do. So Claire, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So when we talk about consistency or standardization, we mean the same things that Rachel is talking about. So we want our managers to be consistent about how they give feedback, to be consistent about how they develop strategies or objectives and key results. But we also, in such a distributed organisation of our scale, we're not big enough to have huge learning operations in each region. So we talk about consistency of opportunities to learn and develop and grow your career and have an impact at Twitter. So regardless of where somebody is based, we want them to have the same opportunities. And with nearly 50% in San Francisco and the other 50% across 30 offices, that's a huge challenge. and it means making some quite hard decisions. We are really quite ruthless about what we choose to focus on. We work with our leadership team to figure out what the key company objectives are, and then we will see where we can make an impact. And then when we do, we will make a global, scalable solution. And when you're in a regional role or on the ground, that means saying no a lot. It means you can't be reacting all the time to the needs of the leadership. It means you're controlling the dialogue about what's important for the company and getting feedback and input from all the different stakeholders that you have. It also means you have to go slow to move fast. It is much quicker to source a local vendor to come in and do some training on diversity and inclusion, and there's loads of them out there doing that, but it won't mean that there's a consistent way of operating. So I'm often telling people, it's coming, it's on the way, it's coming, but we really want to offer something that is consistent and available to everybody in every location. And we think that's how we can make an impact. And I'll give you an example. When I started at Twitter, the site leadership in Dublin, the office I sit in, had decided to run a work-life balance program because the site's score in our employee satisfaction survey was quite low. So they brought in a vendor, an amazing facilitator who I have subsequently hired, and he's now a learning consultant at Twitter. And it was a 6-month program. 4 months after it finished, the results hadn't really changed a whole lot. And I believe that's because it's a systemic and global issue. If you've got a manager in San Francisco who's calling meetings or pinging you late at night, you having the skills to cope with that, to manage your time, to prioritise, it's beyond your control. So we're tackling things like our meetings culture, to have fewer meetings, more productive meetings, and we're hoping that that will drive work-life balance better across all locations. So yeah, that's me on consistency. You can tell I'm passionate about it.
I think just leading on for myself, kind of obviously I'm lucky that I have 17 sites, which I actually get to visit twice a year. So yeah, I do track up the air miles, kind of going to visit all the locations. But it does mean that when I'm able to personally visit the sites, I'm able to physically see things as well. So experiencing it from a guest point of view, so experience the whole service delivery from the hotel, but also spending time with my HR director and my L&D manager on site, and those operational coaches that deliver those SOPs in locations as well. And in between that, Skype's my best friend. All my calls are done on Skype, so I can see people, we can integrate, and really, really staying very, 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 very close to people, which is really important. So I think we have an activity, don't we?
We do, yeah.
Yeah.
Gonna make you work.
So I think this is me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we'd like you to do is, and again, we'll leave this slightly up to you. You're naturally in tables anyway. I know some of you are kind of behind, so I don't know whether you can maybe get close to a table. What we'd like you to do on your tables, we're going to give you 5 minutes, so you're going to have to work fast. And we'd like you just to have a conversation around these questions we've put on the screen. So, what are the blockers in consistency to your organisation? You all represent different organisations. So what are those blockers? How can you overcome them? Have you thought about it, or what are you working on? What support do you need? And what are the possibilities if you could remove the blockers? Now, you can just stay as a conversation on the table, or if you wish, there is a number of flip charts around. If someone wants to do something on a flip chart, that's equally fine as well. And at the end of the 5 minutes, what we'll do is pick a few of you to kind of share kind of your discussions, if that's okay. Does that sound all right? Are you willing to participate with us? Yeah? Great. Okay then. So we'll give you 5 minutes. Get in your tables, and we'll let you know when the 5 minutes are up. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we'll call that time. So what we'd like to do is maybe get, I don't know, 3 or 4 tables just to kind of share kind of what the conversations are. And we have the lovely Sheena with her microphone. So she is going to push it under your nose. So who would like to go first? Who would like to share? Oh, fantastic gentleman at the front, yeah?
So we just talked about 2 things. We talked about the environments. We talked about two things: the environments in which our platforms are hosted and not translating well in areas like China and things like that, which changes the consistency of the material that the instructors might pick up. And the other thing we talked about was and how the trainers then use cultural nuances to deliver out the message, which changes the underlying message which we've set out.
Fantastic.
And then we didn't get to how can we overcome them also.
No, but you were having a very good conversation, so it's okay. It's interesting your point on there's two things that both Claire and actually I talked about, and you'll probably hear those both being talked about kind of later on. You had a particular example in Japan, didn't you, with Twitter? Yeah. So hold your thoughts. You might hear some answers a little bit later. That's great. Who would like to go? Oh, we're staying at the front, I think, here. Yeah, fantastic.
You okay? Sorry, just conscious I'm in a room full of HR people. So the biggest blocker that we came up with was to do around organisation and culture. So a lot of organisations, although they may be global, want to operate in silos, which causes a lot of issues. In terms of ways of overcoming it, and I've seen it in my organisation, it's about actually changing the structure of the organisation. What we did, so I work for JEP, who are a global pallet company. The way we changed it, and it's taken us about 5 years to get there, was firstly organisation. So we now have L&D centralised right across the organisation. And the second bit, which was probably the really clever bit, was centralising the budget.
Yeah.
So if the guys want to do their own thing in region, they can.
But they have to pay for it.
Exactly.
That's what we do as well at Twitter. So we would rather invest in an instructional designer or a thought leader on leadership development than having people out in the field, having to field all the requests, having to say no all the time, pulling in, using their own budgets. So we have a centralised budget and a centralised team with presence in the market, but not intensively so.
And then just in terms of support, so to make this happen, and probably one of the reasons why I'm here today, is, well, first of all, buy-in from the business, which a lot of stuff that you talked about, engaging with leaders and stuff, but also technology and global providers, which is expensive. You know, if you look at Gap Partnership and Miller Hyman and all these other organisations we work with, but it does give us consistency.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Another table. Oh, we're staying with the front here. Oh no, we have one at the back as well, Sheena. The back are shouting too.
I think I need to talk to this gentleman here because my problem is budget being decentralised and my team looking at quality and standards for the bank centrally and always getting into an argument about, but these are the standards, this is the framework, and because it's their budget paying for the content production, we then get into multiple discussions about, well, that's the standard that you should be aspiring to, and not having that sort of power behind us to sort of insist upon it and having to sort of negotiate with their budget and our standards. So yeah, I'll talk to you later.
Fantastic. I think the lady at the back, Sheena, with the you can go. We can have more. That's fine. This one. We'll go. I think this end then. Sorry, Sheena. We're just making you walk. Yeah. We're getting your steps in. Yeah.
Is there another mic I can?
So that conversation that you've just had was an exact example of something that we came up with here. One of the blockers that we come across, and the chap behind me that came up with it, is that we feel that these blockers are unique to us. So we're not necessarily sharing ideas of overcoming them. So how can we overcome them? I don't know if any of you were in that artificial intelligence talk first thing this morning. When he talked about there being a platform, if you've got an innovative idea, you put it on there and kind of you've got the community as a whole to put input into it to make it work. I mean, it's future thinking. We don't, as humans, necessarily put our weaknesses forward. It's not in our nature. But if there was some sort of platform like that where someone put up an issue saying, my budget is kind of internalized or whatever, and someone else came up with that solution, it would be support to overcome them. That the future is then, rather than us all feeling like we've got these individual problems, we actually don't. All our problems are pretty much the same. Maybe your company is bigger than mine, or no one speaks English as a first language, or it's global, or it's UK, or whatever, but the problems we're having are similar. So that sharing of that conversation was a perfect example. They didn't plan this. It would kind of really overcome it quite quickly. And consistency across the board then, not just across the company, would be easier.
Yeah, definitely. being brave, I think, isn't it? And being willing to share. I think even Claire and I have found this kind of working together on this. You know, there was so many similarities, but was differences as well, you know, with the nature of the businesses. So yeah, just being brave, putting it out there, because it probably is somebody else's problem as well. Super. Anybody else desperate to share? All right, we'll get the other tables next time, I think, yeah? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much indeed. It's really makes our job much easier if you're part of this conversation as well. So is this you or is it me, Claire?
This is you.
You're making it me, okay, fantastic.
We were perfectly coordinated. It made a lot of sense last week when we were planning.
Right. Something, you know, when Claire and I were talking, when we think about, you know, learning across borders, and I've kind of touched on it already, is these relationships. And when we think about the hospitality industry in general, it's about people, yeah? And so to be successful in any organisation, but especially where you're crossing borders, relationships are key. So you need to know your people. You need to know the people that you're working with. So how have I done that in my career to date? I rarely use the phone, if I'm really honest with you. I use Skype or WhatsApp video calls. They've become my best friends because I'd much rather, when I'm having a conversation with somebody, see them rather than just being a voice. And you're just missing out on all those non-verbal messages, which are really, really important when you're dealing with people of different cultures and different backgrounds. I need to talk, you know, if I need to talk to a number of people at once, I do a group call. And again, it's great. It's lovely for them because they get to see each other, whereas normally they're only brought together once a year for a conference. So it's lovely that they get to see each other at different times in the year as well. And I always make time for small talk. So at the beginning of a call, it's not straight into business, you know. It's not, you know, but it's about, you know, remembering what's important to them. Maybe picking up on something that they spoke about when we last had our last call. And you know, when I'm on property, it's obviously all about those face-to-face meetings as well, and spending quality time with people. I actually don't often carry my phone with me when I'm on property. I am there for that hotel and for those people in that hotel the moment that I'm there. And my emails, the rest of the company know that when I'm traveling, my emails get done at the end of the day when I'm back in my hotel room. You suddenly might get emails from me at 10 o'clock of night because that's when I'm responding to you, because I want to be there and present for the people that I'm working with at that moment in time. For me, it's key to know your HR and your L&D team beyond their role, their families, the hobbies, important life events, remembering them, remembering to ask. Time with the management team is key as well. I want them to understand the why behind the training, so therefore they will support the L&D and the HR and the operational coaches when they're trying to get people together for the training. And it's also about building trust. Building trust builds understanding. It also builds support. And in today's busy world, I think if I've learned anything, time is the greatest gift you can actually give anybody. You know, we really live in this instant world with technology and everything, but you know, just those face-to-face conversations or giving somebody time is so precious. I also spend time with our operational trainers when I'm on property. I observe them on the job delivering those SOPs, or I get them together for a group, and of course I'm English, we have a cup of tea, you know, and have a conversation and see what's kind of important to them. And I also spend time with our general managers. I always do a debrief with them where I share observations of what I've seen in the hotel and areas that they need to improve on as a business unit. When a new person joins our organisation, either in HR or L&D, I reach out to them and we do a series of Skype calls to take them through materials and so that they have the same understanding as their colleagues that are already existing in place. We have a shared orientation plan for them. And really making sure that they're up to date, they feel comfortable, ready to go and deliver, but also that we start a relationship as well as colleagues. Ensuring the board, those of you who have board level, that is also has to be on the agenda. Our head offices are the largest head offices in Malta. We have a very, very small head office in London as well. So the majority of our board meetings are held in Malta. But the board do come at least twice a year to London and hold a board meeting. And I'm always given an opportunity to go to those board meetings and share what's on the agenda when it comes to L&D and well-being across the company. So therefore, when they're visiting the sites, they can pick up on these things that are working. So for me in the hospitality industry, it's people-centric completely, and relationships are at the heart of what we do. So over to you, Claire, in Twitter.
Thank you, Rachel. For me, I think relationships are critical to driving engagement. That's what I get out of them, and they're critical to ensuring we're feeding back into the central programs that we're developing for cultural nuance. We're developing examples that work in different regions. My personal approach is my HR business partners are my best friends. I don't know what models are in place in your organisations, but there's a lot more HR business partners than there are L&D folks at Twitter. They're out in the region. They're plugged in to leadership and teams and what's happening on the ground. It's a very mutually beneficial relationship. I will give them insights and data. I will educate them on everything that L&D has to offer so they can do some kind of first level diagnosis or recommendations. They will drive engagement for me. They will encourage people to participate. They'll do communications. And I find that a really key relationship to making it work. I think if you're going out with a global, centralized, consistent program, you do need to have a kind of a personal touch on the ground to really make it effective. My next best friend are the leadership in the various countries that I work with. It's from them that I'll hear what are the challenges, what are the issues, how we can make our programs resonate more and be more effective for them in the region, and they will also be key influencers on driving engagement. I think that's actually, there was one other thing I wanted to say. Hold on. We have been running this model of nurturing the relationships, but having a very global centralized offering. And we did some research, a colleague of mine did research last year into careers. And a very interesting result was that there is a better perception of availability of learning opportunities now internationally than there is in San Francisco, where hands down, no doubt, there is more supply, more opportunities for learning. It's easier, it's a site of 2,500 people. And we've realised that's because there isn't this model of nurturing. We don't treat it as a region or as a site. We don't nurture relationships. We don't look specifically at engagement on that large headquarter site. So we're actually hiring somebody who's going to model the same approach in the US. So that's just an interesting bit of information that we found. So we're going to do another bit of table work and just talk about stakeholders. So we just want you to have a chat at your teams. Who are your key stakeholders? And these can be influencers, but they can also be people who can block things or stall progress or make your life a little bit harder. What could happen if you had a good relationship with these people? How can you leverage the different roles and functions in your company to make it work? And what could you do to make your relationship with them better? So again, 5 minutes at the tables, and then we'll hear some feedback from you.
Definitely.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
All right. Let's wrap it up. You can finish off your conversations and let's share some of our findings. We've got two mic runners now. We've got the lovely Sheena and the lovely Rachel. So there's I think a hand in the air there. No, or are you just yawning? Stretching.
Hopefully not yawning, not yet, anyway. So who's going to go first? You're going to make Sheena run or me run? Yeah, who wants? Oh, there we are, right in front of Sheena. There we are, well done.
And there, you've one there.
Okay. So we were just discussing the fact that a very good point was raised that you actually have to identify who the key stakeholders are. So presumably so that one doesn't come out of left field late in the game and scupper everything. And also that fundamentally, and it connects with the stakeholder workshop that was had yesterday, that it's about genuine communication with that stakeholder. So you can make some assumptions, but also not, really listening to what they are saying so you don't lose them and you retain their goodwill and investment in every respect. But just properly engaging with them and listening to what they have to say, because they might have a point as well. So it's not necessarily a question of managing them.
Yeah, 100%.
Great.
Totally agree with that.
Okay, we've got a gentleman here.
Yeah, we had a similar discussion here around, identifying those key stakeholders. And I think one of the things, reflecting on what you just mentioned there, and what I've picked up in my role, I'm kind of newish to the role that I'm currently at, is thinking you know who your stakeholders actually are, and then when you deliver the finalized learning product, someone else comes out of the blue that you've never even heard of, who actually has the ultimate say in whether something gets launched, or they've got a really influential voice. So trying to navigate that. And one of the things that we were talking about here was also when you've worked in companies who have been acquired and become part of a larger group, really trying to navigate new stakeholders that will have further impact on your learning design processes.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, I would say we use a model called JC. It's role mapping for decisions. There's rapid, racy, and it does just help you think about who you're talking to. Okay, Sheena's got somebody, and then there's another gentleman.
No, I think building on the earlier point, we also came in very early on into the topic that it's not just about identifying the stakeholders at hand, but also the relationship between those.
Yeah.
So not only necessarily with you, but internally within the different groups of stakeholders. Because in a large organization across functions, you can have identified all of the knowns and unknowns that you might interact with, but some of the problems and some of the challenges might arise from how those stakeholders sort of interact with each other.
Yeah.
Sorry, was there someone here that I missed? Did I miss a hand at this
end?
end?
Over here.
I just wanted you to repeat the word. It was racy, yes?
Racy, or ACI. We use DACI, D-A-C-I. So it's driver, approver, consulted, and informed. And it's pretty simple. You'll find resources about them, for decision making, Anyone else like to contribute?
No? Quiet one on this one?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think you've made a really good point about the quality of the conversations and the relationships. Like, it isn't, I think if you approach anything like you're managing, you're going to miss out on so much context. And I think that's a really well-made point. Okay, so we're moving on to culture and language. Is that you?
I think it is me,
Okay.
yeah. So I think it was interesting. I think when on our first breakout group, this kind of came up, didn't it? Someone mentioned, how do you do this when you've got different cultures and you've got languages and you're using a global system, and how does this work? I have been very, very fortunate in my career to date that has really enabled me to live and work in many different countries. In one day, I can connect with many different cultures, religions, and beliefs and languages. And I've often actually been asked by colleagues, how do you do it? How are you kind of that person to each of the different countries or religions that you're dealing with? And I have a very, very simple thing. And as a person, I'm extremely open-minded. I don't make prejudgments about people based on where they're from or what language they speak or what their religion is. And it's just really, really helped me in my career just to seamlessly just slip in and be with those people that I'm with at that time. However, that in mind, I do remember back in 1999 when I was working for Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, and I was the training manager at Four Seasons London on Park Lane. And I received a training program from our head office in Canada. Four Seasons is a Canadian company. And I was reading through it, and they had this really stupid exercise in it. Please forgive me if there's any North Americans in the room, yeah? And I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to get my attendees to do this? They're going to think I'm bonkers. And I had to take it out. I had to change it because it was just too North American centric. And then actually years later, being actually in Lebanon, I moved to Lebanon in 2011. And we were renewing the orientation program for Four Seasons. And they sent us a video that they wanted us to show at orientation to all the employees. And they wanted this video to be global. So wherever you were located in the world, you saw this same orientation program. The founder of Four Seasons is of Jewish descent, and there's a scene in the video in his family home during one of the Jewish festivals, and there was a flag of Israel on the table. Well, if any of you know anything about Lebanon and where it borders and the conflicts that have existed in the past, it was just a no-go to have an Israeli flag in a video that I was going to show the Lebanese community. So I had to ring up head office and said, we need to edit that out, please. So I think, you do come across sometimes these challenges that when you are trying to go for something global, that there is these localizations that you do need to make. So therefore we don't have these kind of faux pas, if you like. So what happens today to ensure culture and language? Well, within Corinthia, orientation is translated to the local language, and it's delivered in the local language. So I send out a template, and then they translate it verbatim into their local language. But it looks the same, but obviously it's different languages that are done. When we come to train the trainer, which is how we teach our operational coaches to be trainers on the workforce, we deliver this it's delivered in a local language, and wherever possible we do encourage the slides to stay in English, because really within our organisation English is the business language, and certainly if we want to help people grow in their careers, then we want to try and help them become more familiar with English, so therefore as they progress up the ranks it's not a shock when they suddenly get into a managerial level. For both supervisory and managerial training, we like those to be left in English, both from delivery and slides. However, if we're engaging in a conversation about a particular topic and the people can express themselves in greater depth by switching into a local language, that's absolutely fine. Our learning management system its functionality can be switched into the different languages. So if I'm in Hungary, I can switch it into Hungarian. So when I log in, everything comes up in Hungarian. However, the majority of the content at the moment is in English. However, it is very, very well subtitled, and the cartoon characters that the system uses is very graphic and so people can really understand the message, even if they don't understand verbatim every word that's kind of in front of them. The company that we use are actually translating materials. They've actually picked French, Spanish, German. I don't actually have hotels there, so not so helpful for me. But I'm also encouraging my L&D managers to add local content as well, so they can actually upload things in their local language that they see. Maybe it's a YouTube video or something else they've been able to get their hands on, so we do have content in local languages as well. So Claire, how do you manage this challenge at Twitter?
Yeah, I think this is probably where, in your line of business, Rachel, it's probably much more headquarters to site rather than site to site. Mm-hmm. So we are quite different. We have a lot of cross-pollination and conversations happening across lots of different cultures. So one of Twitter's company objectives is to enable anyone, anywhere to work at Twitter, and we believe that will increase our impact, that our employees are reflective of the diverse voices that use our platform, and that we'll have a better impact in the world if we do that. So one of the kind of foundational competencies that we need our people to have is cultural competency. If any of you has anyone read The Culture Map by Erin Myers? Yeah, few people. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. She's an amazing professor at INSEAD, and she researches how different cultures interact with each other in the context of work. So some examples she would have: if you're at a meeting and there's Japanese people in the meeting, you need to invite them to participate or to contribute. They may not volunteer the information. With Brazilians, you need to dedicate a lot of time at the beginning of the meeting to chatting, socializing, building rapport and relationship, and then the business will get done very quickly at the end. So her book explores all of that. We have a cultural competency tool. We're using a tool called Cultural Navigator by Berlitz, and it allows people to do a short self-assessment, and it plots them on sort of a set of orientations. They can compare themselves to a colleague, they can compare themselves to country norms, and you can also get a team report, so you can see, okay, I've got a bunch of really direct people over here and a couple of indirect people here. As a manager, how am I going to bridge that? How am I going to make sure that everybody is included in the conversation? And we would use that. We support managers in being able to facilitate those conversations, and just really try to remove the friction that can arise, or just the misunderstanding. You know, it's really about misunderstanding. We also are trying to drive better global etiquette around time zone awareness and respect, around you know, just appreciating that there's different ways to come at things. We all do things differently, and that's okay. in terms of our learning design on culture, we always build in a bank of examples, and we'll always talk to, this is where our relationships with leaders are important to understand, like, how does this resonate? How will it land? So in some countries, certain things are more important or challenging than others. On language, I'm sure a lot of you will relate to this. We are an English-speaking company. We need everybody to be able to speak the same language. We don't want anybody's career to be limited by their lack of ability to speak English. So we don't localize our materials. We do offer classroom training and online resources in English language in the handful of territories where language is a concern. And then I guess when we're actually on the ground, if we're delivering workshops, we'll often have a local HR business partner co-facilitate. We'll often provide the materials in advance because some people do better with having read up beforehand, before coming to a program. And we'll try to support in those various ways. And I know there is ad hoc translation that happens in certain areas, but it is really challenging when we're all L&D professionals. You really want to help people. You really want them to be able to participate fully, but at the same time, we don't want to, I suppose, have them held back through lack of English language skills. So I personally find that one very challenging. And yeah, I think that's all I had to say on culture and language.
Fantastic. So, time for another exercise. So, what we'd like you to do this time is, we'd like you to, either you can do it at your tables, or if you want to talk to a partner, if this is easier, discuss how can we be relevant and inclusive in a global context, so you and your organisations, brainstorm ideas for the topic, and again, be ready to debrief. And I really think we need participation from this end of the room, so no pressure, yeah? We seem to have walked a lot this way, so we'd love to hear from this end of the room as well. So over to you. We'll give you 5 minutes again. So have a discussion about this. How does this show up in your organisation? And come up with some ideas for the topic. Okay, thank you. Bring it to an end. That's fantastic. You just also, obviously, you've got great tables, that's all I can say, yeah? Just want to talk to all these people you sat with. So let's hear from the room then. So how can we be relevant and inclusive in a global context? So we've got Claire. Oh, look, Claire, it's your charm, obviously, yeah?
So we were talking here very different realities, but we were saying what is important is to involve the people in the countries. So we were having a couple of examples where from it, I think the barrier starts if you develop something globally and then you tell them to take it, because especially if they have their own budgets, then they will go and they will always have an excuse that they're different, that they need to do it. But if you involve them from the beginning, from the concept, either because it's a workshop or you get their materials, the fact that they really need to feel involved, that they have added value, then you have their buy-in, and then it really makes a big difference.
Such an important point, and I know when I launched the Supervisory Development Programme within Corinthia, when I was in the pilot stages, I got to about 4 or 5 of my key L&D managers. I sent them the material and said, what do you think? Is this going to work with you? And so I think, yeah, a really, really important point of getting them involved. Yes, of course, yeah.
And it's not only the L&D people, but actually depends what kind of training you're developing. But if you get like, I don't know, marketing or sales or finance or whatever it is, because even if you don't involve the L&D from the country, but then the marketer goes and says, I was consulted and I send the material, then the L&D from that country is very much, okay, they're taking us into account.
Great, thank you so much, great point. Who's next? Oh, excellent. Right in front of you, Sheena, there we are, look at that.
I think 3 things are important that we discussed. What's your organisation doing? What's your equality and diversity board? Your inclusivity, how is that measured and how is that filtered down? How do you treat women in your organisation? All of those kind of things are important in this. These guys work for Facebook and they do unconscious bias training, which I think is a great thing to start with. And the third part of it is leveraging your people. So I've worked in organisations where we've used the LGBT community, the BAME community, the carers network, the disabled network, to see actually what do people want on the ground, and that feeds into the E&I board, and that sets the standard, and then everything that we do then comes out of that.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Anyone else? Oh, we've got our key spokespeople here, I think, haven't we? Yeah. Anyone? I hope they're paying you well on the
Looking for
tables.
shining
I was
eyes.
going to say, I think we competitive streaks coming out. It's 2 each, by the way. I think one other element, and this is something that we've done, is actually use L&D to bring people together. So we do run programs which bring people together from different regions, which is now being expanded to other areas. But also I think the use of things like Yammer and stuff, so you start to create a bit of a community. But I quite like what you said earlier as well, is those magic words, what do you think?
Yeah.
It's quite good. We also talked about language quite a lot as well, didn't we? Which there's quite a lot of debate, which I think is always a tough one. But I do think the more you can do in a local language, the better. It's expensive. I work in procurement, by the way, so that's the bit I'm always looking at. But I think the impact is definitely worth it.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much indeed. Super. So, Claire, there's another one for you, I think. No, lady in the pink jumper. Oh, no. Oh, got two ladies in pink jumpers now.
I think apart from the content that you develop, and if you have buy-in up front, that's great, but also the reviewers, our reviewers, the material reviewers are from different territories, and that also gives that extra quality check at the end. And then not only in turn, that's part of the content, right? But then also if you're making visual materials like videos or beyond characters, make sure you're not depicting only the traditional male white speakers, but also have a diversity in aspects of the speakers. And then the third point that we also mentioned was on the accent. Even if your materials are being developed and rolled out in English, make sure it's not a very strong British accent or US accent or whatever they come from, so that it's a more neutral English speaker.
Again, great points. Thank you very much indeed. And one more, fantastic.
Me again, sorry. Evening it all out, 222. Again, I was just going to echo what you were saying. For me, I call it diversity of thought. The people who are developing the modules, they need to be representative of the markets that you work in, because time and time again, all I see in L&D functions are people that look the same, they probably went to the same schools, they live in the same towns, and you will just get learning that looks and feels exactly the same, and will work probably here in the UK, but they don't work elsewhere. And we always put it down to, it's just because it's not translated, but actually it's just because it only works for one group of people, and there are so many different learning styles, so really getting out to your markets for me is a key.
Super, thank you very much indeed. Great. Oh, we've got one more, Claire. Look, the other end of the room was competition now. They wanted the number of speakers. Well done there.
So we had a dialogue around culture. And I work for a company called IKEA, where we have a very strong company culture, strong values, also when it comes to recruitment. So we have been thinking about this topic because I work for the franchisor. Our learning solutions are rolled out all over the world, where we have our stores. And we said, what if we connect the learning solutions and basically the activities that we do in our learning solutions to the values that we have as an organization? And that works really well. So one example could be togetherness is one of our values. So in the learning solution, make sure that you focus on elements that support togetherness as well. So instead of focusing on the culture where people live, basically on the globe, instead of that, you can focus on the company culture, which brings you quite far.
Brilliant. No, I know we did that with Four Seasons, but also with Corinthia as well. Very, very valuable as well. Great. Okay. I've got one more. My goodness me, they wanted to talk on this one.
Okay.
Right.
This is probably the
last
one we have
I
time
think,
for.
yeah.
I'll keep it really short. I'd say two big things that stand out to me is if you work in global, make sure you spend time working in a market, because I think that adds a lot of value. And the second one is ask for what the people need. I think it's a lot about doing the research up front before you even come up with an idea. I think because then if you're building what people actually want and need, you'll solve a lot of the other problems.
Thank you very much. Great. Super. So I think we're now on data and matrix, aren't we? Yeah. Is it me or is it you?
I think it's you.
You think it's me, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, that means I've got to talk. Right, okay. So another way that we look at this is how do you measure your success? You know, you invest all this money in learning and development and you're doing it around the world. You know, how do you measure it? How do you tell it's been successful? I think when I look at hospitality, we have two key stakeholders. We have our guests and we have our employees. And we have to look at both of those because actually, ultimately, the training that we do provides a service to the guest. So if the guest gives us good feedback, something's working right, And then obviously the employees, are they happy employees where we work? So I think in L&D, we're really blessed sometimes when we have, I call them those aha moments, when the light bulb switches on and you've got that instant success where the penny's dropped and someone's just, got that instant reaction to kind of the learning that's taken place. Obviously, there's the classics of feedback at the end of the programs, but what's really important for us is that when somebody's been on a program, that the manager then in the outlet gives you feedback on the changes in behavior they're seeing as a result of that person attending that program. When I think about our LMS, we use Litmus SAP. We monitor engagement that takes place in our LMS. So that's really, really important as well. So we're seeing then kind of how engaged people are in the system is also a measure of success of that system. And from a guest point of view, we have mystery customers. So we partner with a global company that do this for us, and they turn up twice a year. They stay for 2 or 3 days, and then they announce themselves on checkout. And that poor receptionist, when they say, "Hello, I'm from LQA," you kind of think, "Oh my goodness me, what's this feedback going to be like?" But again, it's a great measure of success for us, and it also points out those areas that we need to focus on in the future. And it's quite ironic being here with Claire, but obviously guests today give us instant feedback, don't they? Twitter, Facebook, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, etc., Expedia. So we get that instant feedback about the service that they're receiving, which all links back to kind of L&D. So the other thing is from our employee point of view, though, it is employees actually think with their feet. And if they're not happy and if they don't feel that they're being developed, they leave. And particularly, Gen Y and Gen Z, these are very, very vocal people. And, I think, I'm an ex, but, I'm a lot more loyal to a company than the Gen Ys or the Gen Zs are today. If they're not being developed, they're not getting the things, then they say goodbye and off we go. So I think you've got to look at your labour turnover as well as your engagement surveys. If you're doing engagement surveys, we work with Gallup. We do an engagement survey in November every year. Gallup operate with the Q12 questions, and really looking at those, are you increasing these year on year, not only at unit level, but globally as an organisation. So many, many matrix and data that we use within hospitality.
Great, thanks. I'm so jealous that you have all that data, that you get live feedback from customers. I'm just going to, I know we're getting close to time, so I'm just going to talk about how I use data to drive engagement in the different regions. So I will use, I basically do league tables, and I look at, how each territory is engaging. We look at the sources of data that we have are obviously what's in our LMS in terms of enrollments and completions and satisfaction scores. We also look at our employee sentiment survey is a rich source of data for us, our attrition and tenure and all of those other metrics. And I will, on a quarterly basis, present insights. It really helps with the relationship building with HR business partners and leaders, and we'll have meaningful conversations about what's going on. It does drive a sense of, competition, because no one wants their territory to be, not participating or not engaging. So, it's a useful way to have a conversation with the insights from the data to share with your partners. So I'm going to move on to our last slide on technology. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how if you're striving for a global first approach, technology is a critical enabler. We have a learning management system. We use Zoom for live virtual. We have Slack for cohorts of learning, and then for particular change initiatives. So that's like informal questions and answers about particular things. What else do? We have, in terms of content development, we use Articulate Rise and Camtasia in-house. And our overall approach when we're developing a global solution is to look at resources for in-the-moment learning. That might be a Google Doc, as simple as. Some of our systems are trying WalkMe. We look at e-learning for on-demand learning. That scales. We do live virtual is something that we've been building up over the last 12 months. I'm a big fan. It's been really interesting to see the challenges of rolling out live virtual in a company that hasn't really experienced it. They don't expect to have to talk. So, you really need to socialise your learners around live virtual. It's like I'm at my desk, I can't talk, I'm in a breakout room. They really expect it to be a broadcast experience. And then things like room bookings comes up as well. What room am I in? It's like, you're not in a room. It's just you and your laptop. So that's been interesting. Then if we're doing a much more intensive piece, we'll do train the trainer with our global kind of panel of facilitators. And that's where we get, somebody talked about getting people to review your content. That's where we get really good feedback through the lens of different cultures and perspectives and voices. And we do have immersive on-site programs as well, which tend to happen in San Francisco, but for very small populations.
I'm going to be very sure. How can I follow Twitter? You know, I'm a hotel company. We have an LMS. I use Litmus SAP. For management training, we use Achieve Plus Forum, just been bought by Corn Ferry. They also do live virtual, which is great. We use Skype for Business and personal Skype for a lot of our communications within the hotel. Litmus SAP also has Litmus Heroes, which is all our content. And then we develop local content as well. For us, I would say it's an important cog in the wheel, but it's not the critical cog in the wheel, because we're very, very different in the fact that we are providing a service to people, people to people. So I think that's a key difference between Claire and I, that technology is important, but I wouldn't say it's as critical as it is with yourself, Claire.
Okay, are we at time? We did have...
We're at time.
We're at time, yeah, okay.
So everybody, thank you very much indeed. A fantastic